we're going to take a little bit of a post-mortem on the fantasy football season because, quite frankly, if you're in a league that plays up till week 18, you need to petition your commissioner for being an absolute sociopath at this point because most teams are probably going to be resting a fair amount of high-profile starters. So hopefully your leagues have crowned a champion at this point. But I'm going to run through MVPs, disappointments, surprises, least valuable players. And if you fall into the least valuable player category, you have essentially torpedoed someone's season and sunk their ship in glorious fashion. So we'll save them maybe for last. So starting on a positive note here, and I think there'll probably be some consensus on this. Who was your fantasy football MVP of the year?
Yeah, I don't think there's much debate about this one. He also should be winning the real MVP. I don't know why we're going to give it to Lamar Jackson when he's like ranked in the middle stats this season for quarterback, like touchdowns and yards. But anyway, that's a different rant. But obviously, the MVP is Christian McCaffrey. What a friggin' season this guy had.
Yeah, unbelievable. 1,459 yards rushing, 14 TDs on the ground, 67 receptions, 564 yards receiving, and 7 TDs through the air. Did a little bit of everything this year. And if you're in either a half point PPR or full point PPR, like those 67 receptions are more than most wide receivers are getting out there. Like, unless you're an upper echelon, wide receiver one for a pretty pass happy offense there, you're getting a fair amount of points just in dink and dunk pass situations from Brock Purdy. So you look at his full season, which really is the reason why he has to be the MVP here. I think you could have made the argument that for years, CMC was the, in theory, MVP of fantasy football because when he's healthy, he's an absolute monster. But this is one of the first times, minus this weekend where he got a calf strain and kind of fell off in the second half against Washington there. This is the first time he's suited up for every single game. So if you were one of the fantasy football owners who took a swing on CMC with a high draft pick, you got the full experience this year and got to tap into that wild explosive potential, which is even heightened even more in a Shanahan 49ers offense as opposed to what he was in Carolina.
Yeah, the numbers he put up, just the consistency. Like what he's had one game since he was traded to San Fran without a touchdown. Like that's just insane to think about. I'm looking at it here in our league that we're both a part of, our 14-man league. He is first in overall running back points. Second is Raheem Mostert, who I'm sure we're going to be talking about as well. He scored 104 more points than Mostert.
Yeah.
Like it's not even close. This guy just ran away with MVP. It's just a fantastic season.
Well, and this is, again, no one tunes into here to listen to our personal losses, but I think this little anecdote sufficiently captures how dominating CMC was. Like, if anyone thinks back to, all right, when was a time that the 49ers really got dominated? It's pretty recently. It was against the Baltimore Ravens. Like, anyone who watched that game went, wow, they couldn't get anything going there. Well, CMC still put up 24.1 points. Like, in a game where their team was absolutely bottled up, Brock Purdy's turning the ball over like his life depends on it. They can't get anything going in the second half. They get run out of the stadium, and he still goes out there and absolutely dominates with a touch. And it all really came on one drive. He had like a monster scamper and then fell into the end zone as well too, and 24 points when all is said and done, because when that Ravens pass rush is coming in your face and Brock Purdy's just dinking and dunking it out of the backfield there, which, thank you again to the Ravens for finally ending the Brock Purdy for MVP fiasco debate that was going on. If he had have actually won the MVP this year, we need to have a referendum about what the really most valuable player actually stands for in the NFL. But you look at all of his weeks, 25 or more points 5 times, and he almost hit 25 several other times there. 11.1 points was his absolute floor. So he never went single digits, which very few fantasy football players can say. And that was the week 17 when he got hurt against Washington. Like, Mr. Reliability from someone who throughout his career has largely been a fantasy football headache because you never knew whether you were getting 100% out of him or he was coming in with 6 injury designations to the game.
Yeah, he's definitely turned things around health wise over in San Fran. And I mean, I always kind of cringe at Shanahan. He loves playing him even in late games when they're up huge and just like sit the guy down. But I mean, for fantasy aspect, like it was a perfect season for McCaffrey.
Yeah. So I think we can crown him there the overall MVP. But that being said, there were some other people that were in the runnings, right? You already mentioned Mostert there, but I think there's a case to be made for a couple other players where when you look at the seasons that CeeDee Lamb and Tyreek Hill, and they're the wide receiver one and wide receiver two, and CeeDee Lamb ultimately ended up finishing a couple points ahead of Tyreek Hill, but Tyreek Hill also sat out a week. CeeDee Lamb had all of them. So, it's potato at this point. But there's a real argument to be made for both of those players who really exceeded expectations. Like we all knew they were going to have good years, but when the absolute floor for both of them was they both put up over 1,600 yards receiving and over 10 touchdowns on the year, like that's some very, very dominating stats coming from your wide receiver one position there.
Yeah, CeeDee Lamb, like what a season this guy had. I remember in the rookie draft when he was coming out, and we were just like, Dallas had a lot of holes that they needed to fill, but they just, it's Dallas, so they went for that stupid flashy pick, and they took CeeDee, and like, I mean, obviously Amari Cooper is finishing the season strong, but they don't miss Cooper because of what CeeDee can do working out of that slot position.
Yeah. I hate giving A, the Cowboys flowers, and B, seeing Oklahoma Sooners go to the Dallas Cowboys as an Eagles fan. So this is literally my nightmare coming true at this point. But you got to call it like you see it. Like CeeDee Lamb has really blossomed in that offense. And even the stuff he was doing in college, like you could see the talent was obviously there. But we've also seen talented guys get drafted and they just don't land in a great position and they never reach their full potential. But I think you're really seeing like a safety blanket mentality that Dak has kind of taken to his relationship with CeeDee Lamb, where it's, you know what, screw it. If it's a contested ball or a tight window or, 50-50 jump ball, throw it out there. Like he's got the confidence to throw it to CeeDee Lamb, whereas everyone else on that offense, maybe he's thinking twice about it. So when you get that kind of connection with a quarterback, you're going to put up the monster stats that CD is. And maybe the opposite side of the coin there is just, Tyreek Hill is just such an athletic freak that
Mm.
he's either going to be 5 steps clear of his defender on a deep ball, or you throw it to him 3 yards from the line of scrimmage and just watch him do all the, yards after the catch miracles that he does. But I mean, both of them, if you're going to kind of even thinking ahead to 2024, like what are they to you? Are they top 5 picks? Are they top 10? Like they're obviously first round selections for next year's draft, but where do they kind of fall as far as what you're looking at for next season's fantasy football rankings?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we have to wait and see what goes on in Minnesota with their quarterback situation. Because if they get Cousins back, then Jefferson probably bumps up to the second pick behind McCaffrey again. But to me, yeah, they're right there, 3-4, probably safe picks there, where you're just going to have such a high ceiling with these guys, and just like the amount of separation Tyreek Hill gets is just unreal. And I can't remember off the top of my head. He's reaching his 30s, I think, but he just is not slowing down at all.
Yeah, unlike us, who once we hit our 30s, there we aged like a bag of milk. But anyways, so we might as well bring up your friend Raheem the Dream,
Yes.
with 18 touchdowns on the ground, which you clearly had on your bingo board going into this season, right?
Yeah, he was like ninth, 10th, 11th round pick in most drafts. Like he was not even a consideration. I think him and Jeff Wilson Jr. were going back to back. So it was kind of just a coin flip of which guy you're taking. But I think in Yahoo leagues, I think it was something like 65% of teams in the finals had Raheem Mostert. Like he just carried your team. It's like you need that guy, those late round picks to help insulate your team. Like those late round running backs are just going to steal you game after game after game. Like he had a hell of a season just punching in touchdowns.
Yeah. Well, it's like the old adage, right? Like you can't win a league usually in the first couple rounds of a draft. You can lose it, right? You can
Sure
take some,
can.
yeah, take some absolute flyers in the first couple rounds, but normally you're getting a fairly safe, someone who's going to produce there. It's the later round guys that really do separate those that make the playoffs versus those that are out of the running by week 8 of the season, right? And they're already ready to blow up their team, and you got to watch them for collusion trades. So it's guys like Raheem Mostert and Wilson and a chain where it's this weird, you don't know what the situation's going to be. And unless you're a diehard Dolphins fan or you are following those training camp, notes like a hawk, you kind of got to roll the dice. But they're ultimately the ones that end up paying off. And Raheem Mostert over 1,000 yards on the ground as well too. 25 catches, 175 through the air, 3 TDs receiving. So he's the overall, player number 16 in Yahoo. But that's also factoring in quarterbacks. So if you take out the quarterbacks, he's actually the 4th ranked player. And it literally goes CMC, CD Lamb, Tyreek Hill, and then Raheem Mostert. So huge season for him, which is nice to see as well too, because it's one thing for some of these star running backs to try and reset the perception and value of running backs on the open market there, but you really do need more contributions from guys like Raheem Mostert to go out there and start reminding people that, oh yeah, running back is a very valuable position and we should probably start paying them accordingly, because it's not just a fantasy thing. You can see the teams that succeed usually end up having a pretty good running game there, and I don't know why that's so hard for NFL teams to see.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it was just so hard to predict, right? He's almost 32, which is wild. But I think he scored more touchdowns this season than he has in his entire career. Like, just a super talented guy, just destroyed by injuries year after year. And he was relatively healthy this year too, which was again was a huge factor in this performance.
Yeah. Well, that's just it, right? Is there's more than a few players that you can rattle off at the drop of a hat who you see the talent. It's the when healthy, this guy is blank, right? But it's that health piece where it is, CMC and Raheem Mostert and some of these players who have got these long injury lists that when they are 100%, they are true game changers. It's just, are you drafting them the season that they're missing 8 games, or are you drafting them the season where they're healthy for 95% of the season? That's why, again, there is a degree of skill to fantasy football, but there's so much that's out of your control that just comes down to sheer luck, and that the injury bug, you could draft the best team in the world, but if one of them, Nick Chubb goes down in week 2 with torn ACL, great. Suddenly it's a lot harder of a season for you.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, he's gonna be another one that's just gonna rocket up drafts for next season on redrafts. Like, he is still under contract with Miami at a super cheap rate. I think it's owed like $2.3 million next season.
Yeah.
So he's not going anywhere. He's just gonna do it all again next year if he can stay healthy.
Yeah. I do want to give, before we move on from, the MVPs there, I want to give a little hat tip there to Amon-Ra St. Brown, because he had again, monster year as well, too. I'm a little bit leery about what happens in the offseason here in terms of what does the Lions offense look like next year? Do some of their coaches get poached? Who do they replace them with? What kind of scheme do they bring into the table? Does, Jameson Williams and all of a sudden take that really big leap next year as well, too? If he can stay off gambling websites, like there's a lot that goes into it, but want to highlight he had himself a monster year there. 112 receptions, 1,371 receiving yards, and 9 TDs. But he's one I've got a little asterisk next to heading into 2024's draft until I see how some of the off-season shenanigans kind of play out.
Yeah, I've got the same concerns, especially with Ben Johnson looking like he's going to get paid $15 million a year to go somewhere. And the only knock with Amon-Ra is he's that guy who always seems to be kind of hurt. He's always dealing with a toe injury or rolls an ankle. So you always just feel like he's one breeze away from missing significant time. It just hasn't happened yet. So he always is a concern to me. But I mean, like, especially if you're in a PPR, he is just a machine at racking up targets. So he is a fantastic pickup. If you had just gone in your draft and just decided to go all Detroit Lions, you probably would have made it to the finals.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a theme to it that I think if there's anything that can be taken away from this year, it's number one, don't be shy about taking the guys with long injury history. Like Keenan Allen's another one, right? Who's always injured and ended up having a monster year until Herbert went down, and then Allen was like, you know what? Actually, I am hurt. I'm just gonna shut things down for the last couple of
weeks. Take the rest of the season off.
Yeah, Easton Stick doesn't do it for me there, but that's one theme. But the other theme is too, I think players need to take a longer look at the offenses that they are drafting their players in, rather than what's the name of the player, right? Because we saw quite a few big name players who maybe went into a new system, or the team was trying something different, or new quarterback, and the connection just wasn't there, right? Where some of these high scoring offenses, there's everyone that's eating every single weeks, whether it's Montgomery, whether it's Gibbs, whether it's Amon-Ra St. Brown, whether it's Sam Laporta. Like the Detroit Lions offense was one of those that if you invested heavily in them, you probably did well. The Los Angeles Rams, there's another one, right? Kyron Williams, Puka, Cooper Kupp was really up and down this year, but again, he kind of provided for the most part, if you average it out, right? He had a good year as well too. And even Matt Stafford, who people were ready to pour dirt on his name there, he kind of turned it around in the second half of the season as well too. So if you get into these high scoring offenses, that's almost better than having a big name player who's playing for someone who their team struggles to put up more than 20 points on a weekly basis.
Yeah, I mean, Stafford had not a great finish in fantasy, but if you think of back to the start of the season, like every game, he was just plowing down the field, these 80-yard drives, and they're just fanning off to Kyron Williams to punch it in. He just wasn't getting, that touchdown deodorant to just really boost his numbers, but he's looked really great. Like fantasy football aside, like on the field, he has having one of his best seasons since he was in Detroit.
Yeah. Anyone else you want to highlight before we flip the coin and get to some disappointments here?
One guy actually really surprisised me this year that I just wanted to give another shout out. Another receiver. I was super down on this year. And I don't know if it's because Anthony Richardson got hurt and Gardner Minshew stepped up, but Michael Pittman Jr. quietly had a fantastic year. Yeah. I just looked, he was our ninth. No, wait, when did he get drafted? He got drafted pretty late in our draft. And he finished as the wide receiver, like 16 in our league. He was a 6th round pick.
Yeah.
And I was just completely off of his wagon. I didn't think he would do anything this year. And he did have a couple down games and he missed a couple games with injury, but for where he was drafted as a wide receiver 16, he had a great year. He looked really good this season. And I think he's entering free agent status as well. So he's going to get paid.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's one that I would kind of lump into the, Amon-Ra St. Brown category there, where there's a lot that I need to see, right? Because I'm not going to sit here and say that Gardner Minshew is the second coming of Tom Brady or anything here, but he's certainly a lot more pass happy than Anthony Richardson had he stayed healthy the entire year. You would have seen a lot more emphasis on the ground game and a lot more designed QB runs and whatnot. And so I'm a little leery as to whether Pittman's success was because of the fact that Richardson went down, or is he just this guy now, right? So he's again where someone who, if he's still around in the 6th round next season, sure. But if he's rocketing up draft boards and there's a lot of talk around him and he's suddenly a 2nd rounder, he's probably someone I'm steering very away from at this point. And I'll let someone else roll the dice on whether he can replicate that kind of success in 2024.
Yeah. Just imagine if Kansas City signs him. Give him that weapon. He'd be a top 3 round pick easily.